Hey, welcome to Henry Wheeler's Movie Reviews, where I take a look at films I've never seen before but others likely will have done. And today we're going to have a look at a film. Because the 30th anniversary of T2 is rearing its head, I decided that I'd take a look at the original, where it all started, the 1984 James Cameron's The Terminator. I do know a little bit about the film. Obviously it's a huge part of popular culture. I am aware of all the quotes and everything, but I've just never seen it, ever. And for those who have not seen it, before we get into the discussion, because this will not be a review, I will be doing a spoiler-filled discussion with my friend Terry to give a bit of context about the release and everything, because he was around when it originally came out in cinemas. Essentially, a cyborg is sent from the future to kill Sarah Connor in the 1980s, whose future son, who is going to be the leader in this apocalyptic war. So they send the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, to off her, and you then have another person from that time travelling back to save Sarah Connor, who is Kyle Reese. That's essentially it. I filmed this a while ago, but so I really hope you enjoy our discussion, and spoilers are going to be had. So I'm joined by my friend Terry, who lives nearby, quite conveniently. I thought it would be interesting to bring him into the conversation because he was obviously around when it came out, so there's another perspective to this, you know, from someone like me who's a complete noob to this sort of stuff, and someone who was there when this was all kicking off. So yeah, what's your experience with the Terminator?
As I was saying as we were watching it, this was not a blockbuster. Like when this came out, this was a cheap science fiction movie, which at the time, that's what it was. In the 80s, you had a lot of like cheap B movies, science fiction movies. You had the big ones. You know, Star Wars came out a few years before. Alien was another big one that was kind of a blockbuster. But apart from that, you had stuff. The biggest blockbuster of that kind would have probably been Escape from New York.
Yeah.
In those days, everything else was like, you know, the James Cameron had just done Piranha 2. It's that kind of stuff. That was science fiction in those days. It was kind of like cheap, kind of grungy.
Yeah, but Piranha 2 was a sequel to a Jaws ripoff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was more like a monster movie in a way.
Yeah.
But it's the kids that, you know, a lot of science fiction stuff was that. It was of like B movie monster stuff or futuristic stuff with absolutely no budget.
Yeah.
This had a slightly bigger budget. There was a studio behind it. I can't remember. There is a story of how they managed to convince a studio to go behind, but they still were given a very low budget because it was like science fiction movies don't make any money unless it's like Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a really surprise hit.
Yeah, it was completely.
Like, no one who made it thought that it was going to do anything apart from Alec Guinness, who was like, I want a percentage of all the money that's made from it. You know, I'm fine with that. It was set for life.
But it was still a studio movie, which was kind of like.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it was brought out as a major movie, whereas most of these kind of science fiction-y thing were like. Were B movies in a way. They were made by the little brothers of studios.
Yeah, exactly.
This was like a major-ish kind of thing, but it never thought. The main attraction of this movie was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
If Arnie hadn't been in it, there's no way it would have had that much success.
Well, he would have just come off the back of like Conan the Barbarian.
That's it. It was this
that sort of stuff.
First thing, and even Conan was kind of niche because it was kind of seen by D&D people and all that.
Right, yeah.
It did have a broader kind of audience, but at the end of the day, and it was the same, the audience for these kind of movies were like young people, nerdy young people who were into that kind of stuff. It wasn't a general public kind of thing.
Yeah, that would have come slightly afterwards.
Yeah, because again, science fiction was not a respected kind of thing.
Yeah, I suppose, because before Star Wars, science fiction was very much not a big kind of... a big thing at all. It was like, things like 2001 and
so
like Silent Running, you know.
You could make like an arty kind of thing to make it more...
Yeah, exactly.
like that, like Silent Running.
Or
which would
Dark
be legitimate.
That's something like that, yeah.
But also the fact that it was Cameron and I know I've got a hot take, like I don't think Cameron's a great director, but he's a great idea person.
Agree. Yeah.
He always has like new things and presenting new stories and new concepts.
Yeah.
And that's his strength. And this was, I know you were saying like the predictability of the fact that you knew that Cameron was the father
get to
from
that
the beginning.
later.
Yes. But at the time, we hadn't really seen that. Like time travel, especially in science fiction, wasn't a thing.
Yeah, I suppose.
I'm sure you had some, but it wasn't. I mean, I know that between Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, they'd written pretty much the whole of science fiction already.
Yeah, exactly.
So some of it was in there, but you didn't really see it in the movies, and not in mainstream movies anyways. More mainstream audience went to see that movie because of Schwarzenegger and because of like... because people heard that it was like a great concept and all that kind of stuff. But at first it was going to come out as another kind of like B movie with a budget, basically. So yes, it did make quite a bit of money, but that was just as much a surprise probably as Star Wars was. That made that much movie,
I suppose. Well, it wasn't as big hit as Star Wars.
It became a cultural phenomenon. Again, not quite as much as Star Wars. So it was more like a cult film that it bred this culture of appreciation, this kind of newly found appreciation for this kind of sci-fi. Yes.
That would then lead on to
the biggest
Cameron being able to make, the
T2 and all that kind of stuff. And again, they gave Aliens to Cameron.
Well, because he would have had some cred from this that they thought, he's a good director to take over the franchise.
And but again, Aliens was it was a big budget. It was more of an action movie with science fiction into it. So Ridley Scott wasn't interested in making an action movie. He made a kind of arty movie with the first Alien. So they gave it to a good kind of like new action director.
Although he chucked that out the window later in his career.
Yes. Oh God, let's not talk about Ridley Scott either.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. It's just like now when we think about James Cameron and Terminator, it's this whole aura around it. When it first came out, this was like a B movie with a slightly better cast and a slightly higher budget. Again, as we were discussing, not that great a budget because a lot of the futuristic things don't look that good. Even I remember at the time, even in 83 or 84 when this came out, I remember thinking, great story, but my God, the special effects are bad. Even Alien, like the monster, it's just like
the animatronics
you believe in everything.
Very impressive.
Whereas in this one, you can see in the futuristic bits with like the skulls on the ground that it's like a plastic model being there. There's no sense of like weight and kind of like it's just and the superimposition of the actors against the kind of the scale model stuff is really badly done, but it's not about that. The movie was all about the concept.
Yeah, exactly.
And about Arnie, and about a couple of jokes. Again, it wasn't that jokey. I'm not a huge fan of T2, because again, the story's great, but James Cameron's so bad at dialogues, and he tried to cram in so many jokes in T2. T2 is almost like a parody.
Right.
So the story is great in T2, don't get me wrong, it's a great science fiction movie, but all the dialogues and the jokes are just so cringy.
As you'd learned to discover with Titanic.
Yes. In Aliens, it kind of works because it's a kind of like trashy action movie, so they've got like really action movie tropes, but at least they're not trying to be funny in Aliens. And in Aliens,
quips or anything like that.
The whole thing, you've got Bill Paxton saying a few things, but they're in character, so it's fine.
Yeah. Whereas
the whole thing with the kids trying to teach Arnie the jokes and all that is just, oh my God, that kid in T2 ruined T2 for a lot of people, especially for me as well.
Look forward to the review of that going soon.
Yes. Which is why, in a way, I prefer the later Terminators, because they're more like proper action science fiction.
Okay.
Some people don't like them because they don't talk enough about, they kind of away from the lore.
Right.
But they're made by people who are used to make that kind of movies, and the dialogues are less stilted and all that kind of stuff. Especially, as I say, the one with Batman.
Christian Bale.
With Christian Bale is great because it's kind of moody and all that, but a lot of people didn't like it because it was like boring and serious and everything. But I kind of liked it because it was like, really high concept, atmospheric, post-apocalyptic.
Like this in the background. What the fuck is it with you?
And the end of that Terminator movie, the special effects are almost worse than in this one. But it's the same as Wonder Woman. Great movie, forget the last 5 minutes, which are awful CGI. And this one was kind of like a mixture of stop animation and CGI.
Well, the thing is, like, the some of the animatronic stuff I thought was pretty
Yeah, the animatronics was good.
Like, where he's like mending his arm or something.
Yes, that was very good. And
like, that looks really, really realistic. Less so with the stop motion stuff, and that was the kind of thing that I was really grappling with. Was where you see him in the mirror, and then it kind of you have the perspective of the mirror, and you're looking at the Terminator's face, and it's just clearly like a clay model or something, and then later on you see Arnie like with prosthetic makeup on,
which is fine,
and it looks good, and I don't understand why they didn't just use that for that moment, because where he puts this, that iconic scene where he puts on the sunglasses,
it's ruined by the fact that
it's stop motion, and it's so juttery, and it took me out of the film.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. Although, like as kids, was I a kid? Yeah, I was like mid-teens. Yeah, that bit with the arm and all that was just awesome to us. Yeah, we had never really seen that kind of stuff before. Maybe with Alien, but it wasn't quite the same.
Yeah.
So that bit we loved. Like we talked about that bit more than anything else.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, this one is proper. There's a couple of jokes, but it is kind of serious and dark and everything.
Yeah.
Compared to T2, which is like completely goes in a tangent into kind of cheesiness.
Speaking of cheesiness, the whole kind of romance angle was just like, oh my god, really? And just that that moment where Sarah Connor says, oh, but I don't know how to do anything, and I was just like, oh, he's John Connor's dad. And I was just like, really? That's okay.
But as I said to you, we'd nenever seen that before.
Yeah,
like in '84, that was a new thing, so we didn't even think of it.
Because you wouldn't have thought about, I suppose, the kind of a time narrative of, you can go back and,
this is
kill someone, and then, you'll if you kill the mother, then that person will not be, but then, if that person goes back, then they can have a child with that person, and then it's cyclical. Yeah.
No, I mean, now if you're watching it, I mean, that's the thing. There's a lot of movies you watch now. It's like, how the hell? But, at the time, this was like mind-boggling to us.
Yeah, plus, I can imagine that, yeah.
Having grown up in France, we never saw... Probably Doctor Who was the one thing that could have prepared you for that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of time travel in that, but anywhere else, I've never seen Doctor Who. It just wasn't really a thing.
Yeah, unless you were like a physicist in that particular
Although
area.
There was one movie... H.G. Wells' adaptation of The Time Machine,
right?
Where Malcolm McDowell,
the film,
goes back, comes back into the 80s, and he's followed by Moriarty,
right?
Because they're the same kind of time as Sherlock Holmes, and Moriarty becomes like a serial killer, and H.G. Wells has to become Sherlock Holmes, obviously helped with some sexy women,
Well, yeah, of course.
All that. So that was the time travel thing. But again, there was nothing about I'm your own mother and like you're my son and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, which
So-
would
which
would be tackled in Back to the Future.
Yes. Yes, and they're completely different.
Yeah, but they're both. I mean, they're essentially sci-fi.
Yes,
films.
Spielberg was more famous, and also at the end of the day, he was doing a family-friendly epic adventure.
Yeah,
It just
exactly.
happens that he used science fiction to think the thing, but it's not really thought as a science fiction movie.
Yeah,
It's a family comedy that uses science fiction to create some.
Yeah,
Science fiction is the excuse for the screwball comedy.
yeah, it's like a means to an end.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
It's not about that as such. But yeah, I guess if I'd seen Back to the Future before Terminator, I might have guessed the whole thing about the mother.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But in those days, I don't think I did. But the thing is, in France, it was brought to prominence because in the 80s, there were so many of these. Science fiction was kind of like becoming a bit better. So amongst all these B movies, you did have something like Alien, and you had other things.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, even that movie with Malcolm McDowell was considered a kind of arty movie. So they'd actually started a science fiction film festival
Right.
in a ski resort in France,
Okay.
beginning of the 80s, and it lasted maybe not that long, less than 10 years.
Okay.
And that year, Terminator won. But everybody was incensed because there was another movie that came out that was a more kind of like moody, arty kind of movie that everybody thought probably not as entertaining, but had more cred to it.
Right.
So in a way, it brought this to the attention of the general public more than normal, because normally only the kids would have gone to see this. And it also incensed the kind of critics because they're like, this is drivel and all that kind of stuff. So at least, when I was in France, when this came out, when the festival was on, it would have been on the news every night. They would interview, because you had like famous French actors going to watch these movies, and they were part of the jury and everything. So you'd have like a really famous actor telling you about the movies they'd seen that day.
Yeah.
And I remember with the French actor that was there, member of the jury that saw Terminator, it was like, oh my god, this is like, everybody seems to love this, but it's like such drivel, American, over-the-top B-movie.
Yeah.
I don't see how this could win or whatever. So when it won, like everybody was incensed. But obviously the jury was more into science fiction.
Right,
So as a science fiction movie, this is more entertaining, this was more to it.
Yeah.
So suddenly it became quite big in France because of that, because we would have actually seen on the news, in those days everybody watched the news.
Yeah.
People talk about this movie.
Yeah,
Give
exactly.
this one B movie with a bit more budget, and suddenly it was like, oh yes, let's give this guy more work.
Yeah.
And thankfully he didn't mess it up. And with aliens and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but then he went on to make Titanic
But then
and Avatar.
although they are the two most watched movies in the world.
Yeah, but I
So
mean,
it doesn't, which means
Back in Black is like the second most sold album of all time. It doesn't mean anything. So yeah, popularity is not a barometer of
No,
quality.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this was my experience. This is what happened when Terminator came out. It's just like a slightly better than B movie that suddenly launched a career and launched a whole kind of concept and a franchise. But when it first came out, they never thought it was going to be that.
Yeah.
They just thought, oh, hopefully this science
break
fiction movie
even and
will make a bit more movie than other
Yeah.
crappy ones. You had stuff at the time. There was a lot of like horror stuff as well. But these kind of horror movies had started coming out. Oh, like in '81 you had Poltergeist.
Oh yeah.
So horror in a way was kind of bigger, and even a lot of the science fiction things were horror science fiction.
Yeah.
Which is why kind of like Alien came out on the back of that. Alien was more considered a horror movie than a science fiction movie.
Yeah. I can
It's
see
just
that. I mean, it's essentially a slasher film.
yes, but the whole science fiction, the look. It was the first time you saw a spaceship that was dirty.
Yeah, that
like
looked worn.
Concept
and,
of like we're still humans operating machinery.
Yeah.
This is an old ship, so it's not going to look like it was
Pristine,
before, pristine, and with you were in space,
Yeah.
but it wasn't strobe lights and white and everything pristine.
Yeah, it felt very grounded.
Yes,
and,
you had like
you could relate to
growing
these
off the road,
characters who dressed in everyday clothing.
Yeah, because they were just workers. They were literally
exactly.
just factory workers.
They're truckers.
That just happened to have been in space.
Yeah.
It was sold. It was like a horror movie at the end of the day. So horror almost sold better than just straight science fiction at the time.
Yeah,
Everybody just wanted to do horror. And this also, the whole thing of the fact that Terminator keeps coming back at the end is a horror trope.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And as I said, the
monster just does not die.
Yeah.
And it just keeps coming back.
Because he's not that scary. It's like one guy. And eventually, when he's out of robot, if you just run away, he's not that fast or anything.
No.
But they just had the way that was the one thing that we all thought that when we saw the movie. It's just like, she is very upset about this very slow moving monster. It's just like, calm down, just like run away or whatever.
I suppose
climb some stairs.
If you're in that situation, you might not like.
You might be frozen
you might
by
be
fear.
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty normal.
I guess, but it was like
action.
very horror tropey.
I suppose.
And the fact that, as I told you at the end, the press, the way that he dies, is the same way that the Fly dies in the original Fly.
Yeah.
With Vincent Price. So it was like a throwback to classic horror movies as well.
Yeah.
Now we think of it as science fiction, but at the time it was pretty much
drawing heavily
on horror.
Yeah.
And a lot of, even at that festival in France,
yeah,
most of the movies, the science fiction movies at the time, were going into horror more than anything else. And even the kind of like bigger budget or more credible kind of science fiction, again, Star Wars was unique because Star Wars was like adventures and there was like a western and stuff. Everything else, even the stuff in space, even the one that you said, like Silent Running and all that, at the end of the day, they were horror movies. Like something horrible was coming to get these people. Same as the original one from the one they did with George Clooney recently.
Solaris,
Well, Solaris, that was a horror movie as such.
It
just happens to be in space. So, like the kind of big fun science fiction that we got, and I guess that's why T2 had all the jokes and all that, because he tried to make it into more of a kind of like action fun science fiction thing. But it's still a horror movie. It's still a monster slasher where a monster is after you trying to kill you.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of principle as Chainsaw Massacre or The Hills of Ice at the end of the day. So that it turns more into horror than like pure science fiction that we mean now, with superheroes or like space odysseys and stuff like that. It just wasn't really a thing at the time. It's just like Star Wars had done it, but then and Galactica tried to do it. But then everything else was just like, if we go to space, we're going to meet a monster, he's going to try to kill us. Or people are going to turn against each other and we're all going to kill each other in some cheap warehouse in the suburb of Los Angeles, but we're going to pretend we're in space. I guess.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the score because it's obviously like really iconic. The actual theme, it still sounds great. But those synths that are mimicking, because I find this, that my dad said, because this was when we were talking about The Untouchables, he said, you can always tell when a film is from the 80s, when a film was made in the 80s, but he maintained that The Untouchables was the exception to the rule. And then we watched it recently, he was like, oh no, this is really 80s.
Oh really? I don't remember it as that.
It was particularly the score because it has that really synthetic kind of quality to it, and you'll hit because there was the sound that just kept coming, and I was trying to work out what it was.
You say what they were trying to imitate, but to me it just sounded like pure synth, not even an imitation.
But no, because like with the synth leads, you have these really really great square synths that just sound so good. And then there's like these other elements that come in and you're just like, kind of dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, and it's like, I don't know, it's like a very low bass note on a piano or something.
Yeah, but not even that.
It doesn't. But
no, it doesn't age well. And like the pop music was awful.
Yeah,
the incidental music was like very 80s.
The way that just the costumes, it could not be made in any other era. But like even the really horrible sex scene, like even that feels just so 80s. The way it was shot, and I'm just like, oh
no,
God, it's not going to do this, is it?
That is James Cameron, because there's some
James Cameron.
There's some great sex scenes in the 80s. Brian De Palma.
Yeah, Brian De Palma's got
he's a pervert, but you can tell.
He's quite a voyeur.
But he's like the whole...
Well, he learned from the best, didn't he? So,
because he's a fan of Hitchcock, but you never get aroused in a James Cameron movie.
His dialogue is really dreadful. Like, it's like he's like a polar opposite to a certain extent to Quentin Tarantino, where it's like you've got one end of people never speaking this way, and then you have the other, area of, people do not talk like this either.
But at least one is kind of entertaining and like innovating.
Yeah, I suppose.
Whereas with James Cameron,
it's just like
it's the kind of stuff. I always say for some movies and some dialogues, it's the kind of stuff you would say as a kid when you're trying to imagine a scenario. So then the guy says, "Oh, but no, I'm going to kill you because you're so bad."
Yeah.
And James Cameron literally does that. It's like, what would I have said if I was 6 years old and playing with my friends, trying to imagine we were playing cops and robbers, and he uses that dialogue.
And then you go to Titanic, where you have like literally like pantomime villain.
Yes, it literally
the Delizé character.
Yeah. So the romance is this. It's just like, oh my God, that's sexy. I forgot about it. And it's just like, oh my God, that's so bad.
So what's your final kind of thoughts on?
It's aged badly because of the thing and all that. The concept is still good, and the story. It's one of the ones where the stories run. Although, fair enough. T2, I'm not a huge fan, but there's some great elements in T2, and the story follows well.
Yeah.
Aliens, the original version, because everything is. If you watch the special edition, it's awful because it's literally the way James Cameron would have shot it, with his kind of like very childlike way, which is literally explains everything. The whole great thing about Aliens is that the whole thing about Newt and all that is left to your imagination.
Right.
If you watch the special edition, he explains everything, and it's like then it's not that great high concept. It's just like a cheap science fiction movie where you explain where everything comes from.
Yeah, it's like the ending of Psycho. It's like, why did you just describe? Oh yeah, he's not actually a transvestite. He's meant. It's like I know that.
Yes, exactly. T1, he didn't have enough money to make like a bigger movie. He shot everything he could, but I think it holds up quite well in that sense. It's still a good science fiction slash horror movie. Yes, the fashion's awful and the dialogue's, but it's not because it's aged, it's because it's Cameron. But the concept is great, the action's pretty good. So I haven't watched it in years, but it's it's easy to watch.
Yeah, again. It does.
There's a lot of 80s science fiction that's not. Although again, the ones I mentioned, like Escape from New York and Big Trouble, are still very easy to watch even nowadays.
John Carpenter's a much better director, but
the characters are much better in John Carpenter, and the humour is better. Yeah, James Cameron is not a funny person. So when he tries to make a joke, it's just always. I mean, that I'll Be Back was good in that one because he had the one.
Yeah,
and
that's
it was kind of like but the humour with her flatmate and the boyfriend Parveen. That was so forced. It was just kind of like awful. But anyways, no, it still holds up well.
So what would you give it out of 10?
The thing is, like, after the fact, because of what it sprung and what it meant, you could probably go up to an 8. As a movie by itself, it's a 6. But because of what I know now, at the time I would have only given it a 6.
Okay.
It was like an entertaining B movie.
Right.
Maybe a 6.5 because Cameron is very good at concepts. And so yes, so you could see that it would spring a concept, and that was a great story. So for the story, I probably would have given it, but as the way it was made and everything else, it was a good, solid 6.5 science fiction B movie, no more. Nowadays, seeing back on how innovative it was at the time, then yes, I would give it an extra couple of points because of that. But at the time, we didn't realize. We thought, it's a little bit better than the others. But it's still got shitty special effects and or horrible dialogues and bad costumes. But the story was better than most other movies. So that's the thing now. It's really hard to look back at it as a thing by itself, because it's not. So there we go.
Well, that was our mainly Terry's thoughts on. Sorry. No, it's fine. I mean, I didn't really have much else to add, to be perfectly honest, because I agree with most of what you said, really, which is rare. To be quite honest, we have very, very, very different tastes in film.
Not really.
Well,
there are very unique movies that only people in the world who have seen that's appreciate.
True. Yeah. That is true.
So,
but on blockbusters, not so much my thing.
Not so much.
No. Let me know what you thought of the film in the comments, or what you thought of the discussion, because it wasn't really a review as well. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you all very soon. And I'll be doing another video with Terry for the 30th anniversary of T2 coming up shortly, so look out for that.
I look forward to the jokes.
Bye.